It was supposed to be a standard mission: retrieve intel from an abandoned Vexari base on the Outer Rim, get in, get out. Simple. But as Captain Mara Asher dropped onto the dusty surface of the desolate world, her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Her boots crunched against the cracked ground as she moved swiftly, her rifle raised and scanning for any sign of life, any threat. The Vexari had left this place months ago. Or so they thought. "Mara, I've got a bad feeling about this," came a voice through her comms. It was Sergeant Alex Ramirez, always the cautious one, always looking out for everyone else. She could hear the same unease in his voice that she felt in her gut. "Stay alert, Sergeant. The mission doesn't change," Mara replied, her tone steady but sharp. She trusted Ramirez, but she knew there was no room for hesitation now. The fate of humanity depended on what they found here. The Vexari had been growing bolder in their attacks. They were using this abandoned base to plan something far more insidious than Mara had imagined. They approached the entrance of the base, a cavernous structure that loomed over them like a shadow. It had been stripped of most of its alien technology, but the Vexari left behind a web of systems that could reveal critical information about their next move. The doors slid open with a hiss, and they entered the building's interior. The air was stale, filled with dust and decay, but the faint hum of dormant machinery hinted that something was still operational. The metallic walls, once sleek and pristine, were now scratched and battered from years of disuse. Mara led the way, her fingers brushing lightly over the cool surfaces, a silent reminder of the power that once resided here. "Keep it tight," she ordered. "Let's split up. Ramirez, you're with me. Evans, take the west wing. Stay in contact." As Mara and Ramirez moved through the dim corridors, the atmosphere felt increasingly oppressive. She could hear the quiet echo of their footsteps, the only sound in the otherwise eerie silence of the base. The deeper they went, the more Mara's unease grew. Something was wrong here. The base should have been completely deserted. The Vexari weren't known for leaving anything behind. They reached the control room, a large, open space dominated by a series of flickering consoles. Mara's eyes immediately locked onto the central display. It was active, but it wasn't showing the expected data. Instead, it displayed coordinates that led directly to Earth. "What the hell?" Ramirez muttered under his breath. "Why are they targeting Earth?" Mara's heart skipped a beat. She had feared this. The Vexari were never just interested in conquest. They were driven by something darker, a desire to control, to wipe out any species they deemed unworthy. Earth, humanity's home, had been their prime target for months. But now, with these new coordinates, Mara realized they weren't just planning an attack. They were preparing for something far worse. "Get me those coordinates, now!" she snapped, her voice tight with urgency. Ramirez worked quickly, but it was already too late. The base's alarm system went off with a deafening screech. Lights flashed as the facility's emergency systems activated. Mara felt the rush of adrenaline kick in, but before she could react, a voice crackled through the comms. "Mara!" It was Evans, his voice frantic. "We've got incoming. They're here." The door to the control room slammed shut with a metallic clang. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. Mara's eyes darted to the corners of the room, assessing their position. She could hear the alien growls, the distinct hiss of Vexari soldiers in the distance, their weapons primed and ready. "We're trapped," Ramirez said, his voice low but resolute. "What now?" Mara's fingers tightened around her rifle, her mind racing. She couldn't afford to waste time. The Vexari would be here any second, and she needed to get the intel they had gathered to the Federation. Earth's survival depended on it. "Blast the door open," Mara ordered. "We'll fight our way out." She moved quickly, her heart pounding in her chest as Ramirez fired at the door's control panel. Sparks flew, and the door buckled under the blast. As the door crashed open, they found themselves face to face with a group of Vexari soldiers, their monstrous forms silhouetted in the doorway. The firefight erupted immediately. Mara's rifle spat out rounds with brutal precision, taking down one soldier after another. But they were overwhelming. The Vexari had the advantage in numbers and strength. Mara and Ramirez fought fiercely, but she knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Her mind raced. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a shadow loomed. A massive figure, clad in shimmering armor, emerged from the smoke. Mara's blood ran cold. This wasn't just any Vexari soldier. This was the commander. The one they had been hunting for months. And now, he had found them first. The commander's voice echoed in the chamber, deep and commanding. "You think you can stop us, human?" His eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and his breath came in slow, measured hisses. "Your species is weak, just as all the others before you." Mara gritted her teeth. "We're still fighting. We won't fall." The commander's laugh reverberated off the walls. "Foolish. Your resistance has already failed. This is only a small taste of what awaits you. Earth will be ours." Mara's pulse quickened as she ducked behind cover. This wasn't just a battle. This was the beginning of humanity's extinction. If she didn't act fast, there would be nothing left to fight for. Her hand reached for the grenade at her waist, pulling the pin and tossing it into the room. The explosion rocked the chamber, knocking the commander off his feet. The Vexari soldiers were momentarily stunned, giving Mara and Ramirez the opening they needed. They surged forward, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the remaining soldiers, knowing that this fight would determine the fate of Earth. As the smoke cleared and the last of the Vexari soldiers fell, Mara stood panting, bloodied and exhausted. The room was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the facility's alarms. She looked at the coordinates displayed on the screen one last time. The Vexari were no longer just threatening Earth, they were planning something far worse. The commander's dying words echoed in her mind. "You've already lost." But as she looked at the faces of her squad, battered but alive, she knew one thing was certain: humanity had not lost yet. She wasn't about to let that happen. The war for Earth was just beginning, and she would fight until the last breath. Mara's heart pounded in her chest as she crouched low behind a crumbling wall, eyes locked on the horizon. The battle had barely begun, but the enemy was already overwhelming. The Vexari commander had been defeated, but their reinforcements were relentless. The Federation ships were still too far out, their presence just a distant hope, a fading promise in the midst of this chaos. "Graves," she muttered to herself, her mind still on the battle. "We need you now." The comms buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. Sergeant Alex Ramirez's voice crackled through, calm yet filled with tension. "Mara, we're not alone out here. The Vexari are regrouping. They've got more forces coming in from all sides. We need a plan. Now." Mara's grip tightened on her rifle. She didn't need a reminder. She had seen the Vexari regroup before. They adapted, evolving strategies with every loss. But this time, it was different. Their goal wasn't just the destruction of humanity. It was something more insidious, more calculated. Earth wasn't just the next stop in their campaign. Earth was the prize they would stop at nothing to claim. "All right," Mara said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We're going to hit them where it hurts. Set up a distraction at the eastern entrance. I'll take the team and hit their command center. We need that intel now." "Got it," Ramirez replied. "We're on it. Be careful out there." Mara didn't respond, her mind already working through the plan. She glanced at the makeshift barricades the squad had set up, the soldiers watching her, their faces filled with grim determination. This mission was no longer just about survival. It was about stopping the Vexari before they could wipe humanity off the map. As Mara led her team toward the Vexari command center, the reality of their situation sank in. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the distant sounds of battle echoing through the ruined city. The Vexari had crushed humanity's cities, turning them into rubble. But there was one place, the command center, still standing. And if they could breach it, if they could get to the heart of the Vexari's operation, maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. But the closer they got, the more Mara felt the weight of the mission pressing down on her. The command center was heavily fortified, its walls made of alien alloys, practically indestructible. This wasn't just a building, It was the nerve center for the entire Vexari operation on Earth. If they wanted to end this fight, they would need to tear it down. And the only way to do that was to get inside. "Take cover," Mara whispered as they reached the base of the command center. "We don't know how many Vexari are inside, but we can't waste any time." The team moved silently, using the ruined structures around them for cover. They approached the command center's entrance, where 2 Vexari sentries stood watch, their alien weapons glinting under the fading light of the day. Mara didn't hesitate. She signaled for her squad to hold position, then drew her sidearm, the sleek pistol fitting perfectly in her hand. With a quick breath, she moved. Her body was fluid, her movements silent as she approached the first sentry from behind. A quick strike to the neck brought the creature to the ground without a sound. The second sentry didn't have time to react. Ramirez's shot rang out, and the Vexari soldier collapsed to the ground in a heap of armor and alien flesh. "Clear!" Ramirez's voice came over the comms. "Moving to position." Mara gave a short nod. "Go." They breached the entrance, weapons raised. The interior of the command center was dark, lit only by the faint glow of alien consoles flickering in the distance. Mara's squad moved cautiously, their eyes darting from corner to corner, knowing that the slightest sound could alert the Vexari to their presence. They navigated the corridors, the silence pressing in on them. It was unnerving, too quiet for a base that was supposed to be at the heart of an invasion. Something wasn't right. Then it happened. A low hum vibrated through the floor, followed by the shrill whine of a Vexari alarm. Lights flashed red as the base's defenses came online. Mara didn't need to look back to know that they were surrounded. "Ambush!" she shouted, raising her rifle. "Hold your ground!" The Vexari poured in from all sides, their glowing eyes piercing the darkness. They had been expecting a strike, and they had prepared. But Mara wasn't about to let them take this base without a fight. The first wave of Vexari soldiers rushed forward, their weapons discharging in bursts of energy. Mara fired back, her shots finding their targets, but it wasn't enough. There were too many. Too fast. "We need to fall back," Ramirez yelled, his voice strained. "We can't hold them here." "No," Mara snapped, her eyes blazing. "We hold the line. Get to the command console." They pushed forward, fighting tooth and nail to reach the heart of the base. The Vexari had fortified the central command room, but they hadn't accounted for Mara's resolve. She cut through their lines with brutal efficiency, her team following in her wake. The door to the command center slid open with a low hiss, and there it was, the heart of the Vexari operation. A massive console stretched across the room, its holographic display showing a map of the galaxy, with Earth marked as the primary target. Mara's eyes narrowed. The Vexari weren't just planning to conquer Earth. They were planning to use it as a launch point for a much larger campaign, one that would annihilate humanity once and for all. "Get that intel!" she ordered, urgency in her voice. Ramirez moved to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. The data they needed was right there, within reach. But as Ramirez accessed the information, a cold chill ran down Mara's spine. There was something else, something hidden in the system. A message encrypted, but not from the Vexari. "Boss," Ramirez said, his voice low. "You need to see this." Mara approached the console. The message was simple, a string of coordinates leading to a far-flung sector of space. But the source was clear. It wasn't the Vexari. It was human. A Federation traitor. "No," she whispered, her heart sinking. "This can't be real." The betrayal was clear. Someone within the Federation had been working with the Vexari, feeding them intelligence, helping them prepare for this invasion. "We've been set up," Mara muttered under her breath. "The real enemy isn't just the Vexari." Ramirez looked up at her, his face pale. "What do we do now?" Mara clenched her fists. The fight was far from over. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a fight to uncover the truth and stop a far greater conspiracy. "No," Mara said, her voice cold with determination. "We hunt the traitors. And we make them pay." The battle for Earth was just beginning. But this time, they would fight with the knowledge that humanity's greatest enemy might be hiding within its own ranks. Mara's mind raced as she stared at the coordinates flashing across the console. The Vexari were no longer the only threat. The Federation's betrayal, hidden beneath layers of lies and manipulation, had just shifted the battlefield. Whoever had been working with the Vexari had tied their hands, making the next move even more critical. "We've got less than an hour before those reinforcements arrive," Ramirez said, his voice laced with tension. "We're not ready for what's coming." Mara's eyes were fixed on the screen, but her mind was already elsewhere, calculating her next move. Earth was still in danger, and now they had a mole within their own ranks. The truth they had uncovered was like a bullet in the chest, and it was still too fresh to process. The Federation had been infiltrated, and someone at the top was feeding information to the Vexari. "Whoever's behind this is still out there," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "Not for long," Ramirez replied, his tone dark. "Let's take the fight to them." Mara's gaze shifted back to her squad, now gathered around her. Their faces were a mix of weariness and determination, but there was something else, something she didn't like. Fear. The Vexari were bad enough. But a traitor in their own ranks? It made everything harder to trust. "We don't have time for questions," Mara said, her voice sharp. "We're going after the traitor. Whoever they are, they'll answer for what they've done." The team moved quickly, clearing the command center as they went. Outside, the Vexari forces were regrouping, and the sound of their war machines advancing grew louder with each passing minute. There was no safe place to hide. No time to strategize. Only the harsh reality of combat remained. As they made their way through the darkened corridors, the urgency was palpable. The team split into smaller groups, each assigned to search a different section of the base. They knew the traitor had to be within the facility. It was only a matter of finding them before the Vexari found them first. Mara moved quickly, her footsteps barely making a sound on the cold metal floor. She was closing in on something, a faint sound in the distance, a door that didn't quite match the rest. There was a hint of movement. She raised her rifle, signaling for Ramirez to take the opposite side. The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a small room, cluttered with old tech and debris. At first, it seemed empty. But then Mara noticed it. The faint glow of a terminal in the corner, its screen active and flashing with encrypted data. Before she could react, a voice cut through the silence. "You shouldn't have come." Mara spun around, her rifle raised, but she froze. The figure standing in the doorway wasn't an enemy soldier, but a familiar face, Captain Isaac Ward, a trusted officer of the Federation. "Ward?" Mara's voice caught in her throat. "What are you doing here?" Ward's eyes were cold, almost empty of the warmth she had once known in him. He stepped into the room, his movements deliberate, calculated. "I'm doing what needs to be done. You've always been a soldier, Mara. But you've never understood the bigger picture. You've been working with them, haven't you?" Ramirez's voice cut through the tension, his rifle still raised. "You've been feeding them information." Ward didn't flinch. "Humanity is weak. You fight with your hearts, your emotions. But that's exactly why you've lost. The Vexari will crush you, and Earth will fall. But I've been preparing for the future. For something greater than all of you." Mara's heart skipped a beat as she processed his words. The Federation, her own government, had it all been a lie? Had everything she fought for been part of a much larger plan, one that involved the fall of humanity? "You've been planning this all along?" Mara's voice was barely a whisper. "The Vexari invasion, the destruction of Earth. You wanted it." Ward's lips curled into a grim smile. "Not just Earth. I wanted the galaxy to see humanity for what it truly is. A species that can't be trusted with its own future. The Vexari will reign, and I'll be there to guide them." Mara's grip tightened on her rifle, fury coursing through her veins. "You're a traitor. You've doomed us all." Ward raised his hand slowly, as if acknowledging her anger. "You can hate me all you want, but the truth is simple. We've already lost. And those who are willing to adapt will be the ones who survive. In that moment, Mara felt a rush of clarity. There was no saving Earth. Not in the way she had thought. But there was still one thing left to do, and this betrayal. The truth was out, and it had to end here, now. She raised her rifle, her finger hovering over the trigger. Not today! A shot rang out. The blast from her rifle echoed through the room, but Ward wasn't the one to fall. Ramirez's body jerked violently as the bullet passed through his chest, his eyes wide with shock. Mara's heart stopped as she turned to him, the blood draining from her face. Ramirez! She shouted, but his hand was already reaching for her, his expression one of disbelief. Mara! Ramirez's voice was weak, strained. I didn't know. I tried to stop him. Mara knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she tried to stem the bleeding. But she knew. There was nothing more she could do. Ramirez, the man who had fought by her side for so long, was slipping away. Ward's voice, cold and calm, shattered the silence. Did you really think you could win? You were never supposed to survive this long. Mara's eyes locked onto Ward, her grief turning to rage. The traitor wasn't just the one who had betrayed them. It was the system, the whole of the Federation, the ideals she had once believed in. They had failed. But now, it was her turn. She stood, taking one last look at Ramirez's lifeless body. A quiet vow formed in her chest. I'll make sure this war ends, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. And you will pay. With the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders, she turned to face Ward. End it. Now. The fight wasn't over. And the real battle for humanity's future was just beginning. Mara's breath came in shallow bursts as she stepped away from Ramirez's body. His final words haunted her. I tried to stop him. His death had been an unexpected blow, one that threw her off balance. But there was no time to grieve. The traitor had to be dealt with. Ward had orchestrated this betrayal, and he was standing in front of her, calm and unshaken. She wiped the sweat and blood from her brow, her eyes narrowing. You've taken everything from us. Ward didn't move. You haven't even begun to understand, Mara. Humanity was never meant to stand alone. You've fought for a broken cause. Mara's fists clenched at her sides, her knuckles white. The weight of everything she had believed in, everything she had sacrificed, suddenly felt as if it were crumbling around her. The Federation had lied. The Vexari invasion wasn't a war. They were part of something far worse, something much bigger. You're a traitor, Mara spat. Not just to humanity, but to everything we stood for. Ward's face remained unchanged. Call me what you will. But Earth's survival wasn't ever the goal. The goal is evolution. And you, Mara Asher, will never understand that. I'll make sure you pay for what you've done. Her voice was cold, laced with steel. She raised her rifle, aiming directly at his chest. But Ward wasn't fazed. In fact, there was a flicker of something, maybe amusement, in his eyes. He didn't draw his weapon. Instead, he took a slow step toward her. You still don't get it, do you? I wasn't the one who betrayed humanity. You were. All of you. Mara's chest tightened. What are you talking about? Ward's smile deepened. Your precious Federation wasn't the first to make a deal with the Vexari. There was another faction. Long before Earth's leaders came to power, before humanity ever set foot in this galaxy. The true architects of your downfall were the ones who sold Earth's future for a promised place in a new order. Mara's heart skipped. You're lying. Ward shook his head slowly, his voice now filled with a quiet certainty. No, Mara. Everything you've known, everything you fought for, it was built on a lie. The Federation was only ever meant to delay the inevitable. Humanity was always destined to bow before the Vexari. Your leaders made the deal long ago. Mara felt as if the ground beneath her was shifting. Could it be true? She had known the Federation wasn't perfect, but she had believed in it. She had fought for it. For them. Now everything she thought she knew felt like a fragile lie, one that was crumbling with every word from Ward's mouth. Why? Her voice trembled, but only for a second. The rage inside her burned hotter than any doubt. Why betray Earth? Ward's expression softened, almost pitying. Because Earth's potential was never the point. The true power comes from obedience. A new era is coming, and those who will serve will live on in it. Those who stand in the way, they will fall. Like you? Mara's hands shook. She had been part of something that was already doomed from the start. But she wouldn't let that define her. She wouldn't let the Vexari or anyone else strip her of her humanity. You're wrong, she said, her voice steadier now. This isn't about power. It's about survival. And humanity will survive. Ward raised an eyebrow. You're more naive than I thought. The Vexari will wipe out the rest of your kind, just like they've done with countless others. You can't fight what's already been set in motion. Before Mara could respond, a loud crash erupted from the hallway. The floor shook underfoot, and for a split second, Mara thought the base itself was collapsing. But as she turned, her eyes widened. A Federation warship, small but heavily armed, had just blasted its way through the facility's outer walls. The hull burned bright against the dim lighting of the command center, its guns firing relentlessly, cutting through Vexari forces in its path. The doors to the command center flew open, and in walked several Federation soldiers, their armor gleaming in the wreckage. But their eyes were not filled with the familiar sense of pride that Mara expected. They were filled with a quiet, resigned knowing. Mara's eyes flicked back to Ward, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. His gaze was locked on the soldiers, a dark understanding passing between them. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, pulling off his helmet to reveal a familiar face, a face that made Mara's stomach drop. Captain Isaac Ward, the same Ward who had betrayed them. You're too late, Ward said softly, his voice almost sympathetic. Earth's fate was sealed long ago. There's nothing you can do now. Mara's mouth went dry. You were the traitor? Isaac Ward nodded, the cruel smile not fading from his face. Of course. Humanity was never going to be allowed to choose its own future. My job was to ensure the inevitable happened. And now it has. Mara turned to face the soldiers, her mind reeling. They were not her allies. They were not Federation. They had to be loyal to the Vexari. The pieces of the puzzle began to click together in the worst way possible. The Federation had been compromised from within, and this was the last stage of the Vexari's plan, to have humanity destroy itself from within, while the true power quietly waited to rise. You've all been playing us, Mara hissed, her heart beating wildly. The Federation, Earth, everything. It was all a setup. Isaac Ward's smile widened as he slowly walked toward her, his footsteps echoing ominously in the hollow silence of the command center. No, Mara. You just didn't see the truth. Humanity was never meant to survive. But you made the right choice. You'll join us, willingly or unwillingly. You were always one of the few worth saving. At least you'll see the world as it was always meant to be. Mara's mind raced, the weight of what had happened crashing over her. She had been part of the illusion. She had fought for a dying cause, thinking it was salvation. But that wasn't going to be the end of her story. It couldn't be. You're wrong, she said, voice low but fierce, the fire still alive in her chest. Humanity's fight isn't over. And neither am I. As the soldiers moved in, Mara reached for her sidearm, a grim determination taking over. She wasn't going down without a fight. The war for Earth was only just beginning, and Mara Asher would lead humanity's final stand. I'll burn your empire to the ground, Mara muttered, aiming her rifle. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. And Mara was going to make sure humanity's flame would burn brighter than ever before.